met each other out here on the West Coast through Mervyn LeRoy, who I remember every night in my prayers. And I was having a little difficulty because there were other Nancy Davises, and I was getting the mail of one of them. And Mervyn said that he knew Ronnie, who was then president of the Guild, and that he could solve my problem, he hoped. And Ronnie had never met me, but I certainly knew who he was, and I thought that was a dandy idea. So Ronnie called me, and we went out for dinner. He says he solved my problem by changing my name.
You are listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Nancy Reagan describing when she met Reagan, her beloved. And, you know what always stays in my mind is seeing her in her wheelchair at Reagan's burial place in Simi Valley, looking out over the valley. It's such a beautiful spot. And she would go there every year at the anniversary of his passing, no matter how ill she was, and just, I imagine, just sit and reminisce. Joining us now, Craig Shirley, Reagan biographer. Thoughts on the passing of Nancy Reagan at age 94. Craig, it's great to talk to you.
Thank you.
This is, to be expected, obviously. She lived a long life, so many challenges later in life, not just health-wise, and caring for her husband. What should we remember most about Nancy Reagan's influence in the White House and her role in the 8 years of the Reagan administration?
Well, I'm not so sure. I think it's starting to be a little bit overstated that she somehow affected policy deeply. You know, she said in her memoir, she said, "Look, I sleep next to the president every night. Of course, I'm going to let him know my opinions about things." But she got a little bit more involved in personnel, as she did in 1980 when she was instrumental in ousting Reagan's campaign manager because she thought he was hurting Ronnie's career. And then later in 1987, in the ouster of Don Regan as the White House chief of staff, because again she thought he was a detriment to Reagan and the Reagan White House. So the personnel, somewhat, politics a little bit more, but not so much policy, more presentation. But I think she was probably a combination of part Eleanor Roosevelt and part Mamie Eisenhower, somewhere in the middle. She was traditional, but she also had 20th century causes like all first ladies are supposed to have now. Obviously, hers was just say no. But you know what's interesting, Laura, is that I know everybody's talking about policy and her various campaigns and things like that, but this was a marriage for the ages. This was a marriage that ranks with, in terms of White House history, that ranks with the Adams and the Washingtons. They were truly soulmates. They were partners. They loved each other deeply. And it's interesting, it proves the old adage that opposites attract, because he was country, she was city, he was denim, she was silk, he was simple meals, she was complex French gourmet, he was an easy taskmaster on the children, she was far harsher, he was more conservative, she was more moderate. So in many, many ways they were opposites, but they attracted to each other, and that's what I think would form the glue of their marriage.
It was quite something that over the weekend, I think Lester Holt had a package that was already done because they anticipated, obviously, her passing. And I think in every long news feature on her passing, they had to go to the astrologist. Did you notice that? They had to talk about the astrologist. It was unbelievable. Or the controversy about her designer china.
Yeah, so you know what I say to that? So what?
Right.
So what? After her husband was almost murdered, and I think that both of us and probably most of your listeners would have turned to any means whatsoever to determine, how best to protect, our spouse in the future. And lest we forget, is that Hillary Clinton was holding seances in the White House to try to communicate to Eleanor Roosevelt. So before we go pointing fingers at Nancy Reagan, we have to take it in full perspective.
Yeah, well, and I saw that, and it brought me back to the 80s, though, didn't it, Craig? And
Yes.
It seems like the official end of the 80s.
Well, I think we were there. We were both there. It was our Camelot. It was our time. It was a magical. It was a wonderful time to be a conservative in Washington. We knew we were working for a great. We knew who we were, and we knew why we were working for a great man, and that made it very, very special. I don't think liberals will ever really understand it.
In the latter years after Reagan's passing, how did she, spend her time? How did she get along?
Well, she was up on all the, she worked the phones assiduously, and I got many letters from her over the time. She helped me. She told the library to open up sealed files for me to help me with my book research.
Amazing.
And I was there last June. Zuri and I were there last June for the 10th anniversary of his passing. And she was there. There was a symposium of Reagan scholars, myself, Lou Cannon, some others. And I was asked afterwards, we wanted to go say hello to Mrs. Reagan. And we did. And, she was in a wheelchair. She was frail, but there was still, a twinkle in her eye, and her grip was firm. And she, said, thank you for what you're doing for Ronnie's legacy. And I said to Serena, did she say what I think she said? She said, yeah. So she was alert, engaged, and involved until the very end. She often had Fox News on in the background and read, and so she kept up on all of Washington gossip.
Craig Shirley, I know it was a sad weekend for you, and it was it's some news like this hits you. It's really over now. It's over. The Reagan legacy lives on in so many of us, but that was it took me back watching all those old videos. Craig Shirley, thank you so much.